and welcome to a special segment where we will be discussing very special design elements in creating beautiful event tables. I have in front of me a poorly designed table, and we will be discussing the various elements of why this is a poorly designed table and how we can make it better events. Let's get started. We're now going to be looking at the different reasons of why each of these elements are not appropriate for this particular table setting. First, I'd like to start off by talking about the tablecloth. Although this tablecloth is very beautiful in gold color, it actually does not fit well on this particular buffet table. It hangs down very sloppily in the front and actually does not fit the entire length of the table and is short on both ends. So you want to keep this in mind when trying to figure out what color, style, texture, and type of tablecloth that you need for your table display and for your event. The next thing I would like to point out is actually all of the elements on this table are circular in nature. This actually may seem interesting at first glance, but with a little bit more of a critical eye, you can see that it's actually very boring that all of the elements on the table are the same shape and roughly the same height. So you want to make sure that your table display is actually very interesting to look at and is appeasing and appealing for your customer. So this first design element is a large round serving dish. Very beautiful, very formal in nature, but much too large for this size of a table. It's great to balance out your table by having the same type of element on each side of your table, but because one is too large for this table, two is much, much too large for this table and does not look right at all, especially because the size of the element actually overlaps off of the tablecloth and just does not look right. It looks very sloppy. The other thing I want to point out is that we are designing this display for a Christmas party, which is why the tablecloth is gold and why there is a wreath around the punch bowl. At first glance, this may look like a very beautiful way to display your beverage, but actually it presents a couple of different problems. One, this is not the right size centerpiece for this particular size event table. Two, you want to make sure and keep your decorative elements further away from your food. There are a lot of different things that can happen in the decor getting inside the beverage itself or around any surrounding food that is on the table. So you definitely want to keep these things in mind when you're designing your elements and putting them all together. The other thing is that these can be used, these non-alcoholic bottles of wine can be used for consumption or for decoration. But you want to be really careful that they are not crowding the other elements that are on the table, especially if they will be opened and used for customers. These are just a few quick tips that you want to keep in mind when designing your event table for any event, whether it's formal, informal, whether it's a party at your house, or whether it's a large event with several hundred guests. By keeping these tips in mind, you actually then can better design a more formal event table for your next party. Let's start by talking about the green table event. In contrast to the gold tablecloth that was in the poorly designed display, we have actually used this green table runner for a holiday example for what we're going to be talking about today. So this table runner not only fits the entire length of this beautiful table, but because of the tassels on the end, it is acceptable and appropriate for it to hang slightly over on each side. You want to make sure it's exactly centered so that it isn't out of balance with it being too far forward or too far back, and so that the rest of your design elements will also be centered throughout the middle of the table and not too far forward and not too far back. So next we're actually going to be talking about how these design elements are all circular. In the poorly designed table, they were also circular, but they were all the same height. So if you're going to use design elements that are all the same shape, it's very important to make sure that there are height variances throughout your table to create interest. So these display platters for food have a circular top that actually draw your attention away from the fact that all of the elements on the table are circular. So it really helps with, it's eye-catching, and it really helps with the overall balance and appeal of the table, even though the serving dishes are round. This punch bowl, although it is large, because it has height and adds dimension to the table, it actually is not too large for the table. The height differences in the serving platters are slightly lower than the top of the punch bowl, adding interest and dimension to the table as well. So next, I want to actually talk a little bit about this punch bowl. It is much more formal than the punch bowl in the poorly designed table that we looked at previously, and is a much more modern way to display beverage, and is a little bit interactive for your guest as well, which may sound kind of funny, but actually is a lot more interesting for your guest in putting their cup under the fountain and serving themselves if you want your formally designed event or table to be self-serving in this way. It adds interest, it adds dimension, it actually adds interaction from your guest. There's also an option up here to put an additional design element if you choose. We actually chose to not do that because we have a fairly large decorative design element at the base of the punch bowl. The other reason that we did not put a decorative design element up here is for food safety reasons. Earlier I had mentioned that you want to be careful about your decorative design elements on the table and that they don't interfere with the food in any way, and that they're not cumbersome for your guests to actually get to the beverage or to the food that's on the table. So you want to make sure that your design elements are out of the way and not cumbersome for your guests to actually get to what they're trying to get to. So that's one of the reasons why this is actually at the bottom and that there's not a specific design element on the top. So if you do choose to do that, make sure that it actually has more height and goes up rather than hangs down over the beverage. Something to keep in mind. We've also chosen a couple of decorative design elements to balance out the table. These are very beautifully designed holiday candlesticks. For safety reasons, I actually recommend that you use LED lights so that when your guests are reaching across and over to get their food, they don't have the hazard of the flame. So you can put candlesticks in these that are not lit if they're decorative purposes only, or you can actually use flickering LED lights for safety. So either option is acceptable if you choose to keep the candlesticks in these locations. Of course, there are other location options if you choose to have a live flame and still have it be safe for your guests to be around. So there's actually very specific reasons why these design elements work to create a beautifully formal holiday table that anyone can replicate. we've talked a lot about the different types of design elements that are necessary in order to create beautifully designed tables for any holiday event or gathering that you may have at your home or larger event at a hotel such as this one. I would also like to point out that the things that we talked about today are very simple, do not cost a lot of money, and in most cases are probably things that you have around your home. If not, can be borrowed or purchased very inexpensively at your local Buy Mart, drugstore, or even dollar store. You do not have to spend a lot of money to have beautifully designed event tables that will make a big difference at your next gathering. Thank you for joining me, and good luck in designing your next event table.